Yeah. I got it up in here, Queenie. Should be a phone in there. Oh, shit.
Hi, this is Grace with ACTI. Is this Mike? Did someone just join in the conference call?
Yeah, I think Mike Wilson did, but he's not in the webinar yet.
Okay.
Grace, you online?
Yes, I'm online.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Is this Mike?
Good. No, it's Gary Clark. That's what you did this morning, didn't it? I see Mike.
Oh, hi, Gary.
I see Mike's online.
I think he's online, but I don't think he knows that his audio's not working.
Audio is
Maybe he has us on mute.
No, you're not on mute.
Oh, there we go. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
No word from Lori yet, right?
Lori's not going to be a part of this meeting. She's going to be the Tel-Star crew.
Oh, I meant no word in terms of the login.
She's going to be on site probably by 8:30, and I'll get the information.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm seeing another login for Kim. Are we waiting on someone named Kim to join the conference call, or is everyone present?
Everyone's present.
Everyone's present. Okay.
We just
Then
we have a couple of technicians that's not going to make the meeting, so we're recording it for them. So that's why he doesn't want to.
okay, sounds good. All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen. You guys should see the homepage of the ACTI website. Let me know when you do. Good? Okay. All right, so today's webinar is mainly going to be on the NVR3 software. I am going to run through a couple basic things before that, just things that your technicians want to know before going on site, and just how to basically maintain the system, okay? So they can always access our ACTI website. There's a lot of helpful tools down here at www.acti.com. There's the download center with a lot of resources, bandwidth and storage calculator, project planner with a lot of resources for your hard drives, picking switches, estimating the number of days that you might have on your system. So it's all available here, okay? So if they come into the website and they click on downloads at the very top, they'll come into this download center here. So all the manuals that they ever need, all the firmware, software that they ever need is all here, okay? So one of the things that they want to have before going on site is called the IP utility, okay? So this is essentially an IP scanner specifically for ACTI products. So under the global search, if they just type in the two words IP utility, it'll start filtering out the results for them. And as long as they're on a computer, this is the download that they need, IP utility standard edition. Okay, and so when they download it, they're going to get an icon that looks like this at the bottom of the screen. It's going to populate automatically with all of the serial numbers, firmwares, IP addresses of all the ACTI devices that are on that network, regardless of whether or not they're in that network range. Of course, they need to put their computer in the right range in order to actually communicate with these cameras, but this is how you can find the cameras that are on the network. If you want to upgrade the firmware at any point, you can check the serial number for the model number, firmware here for the latest firmware. So for example, if we go back into the ACTI website and we want to look up the latest firmware for the A43, we just type in the model, tell it we're looking for camera and encoder firmware, and it'll find us the latest firmware at the top. So as you can see, it'll be 20206. To compare it with what's in the IP utility, you'll see that this camera is already up to date. Okay? But if it wasn't, all you have to do is check mark that download first, right, your firmware, then open up your IP utility, check mark your camera, click on firmware upgrade, and just browse for wherever that firmware folder is in the IP utility rest. Okay? Another thing that people might not know is we do have guides for all of the software, all of the standalone MVRs as well. So for example, if you had an INR 410 and you're looking for the manual for it, you just type it in into Google search here, click on the VMS manual, and we have the quick installation guide, the admin guide, which is more setup and configuration, user guide for just day-to-day kind of use. So in the quick installation guide, it gives you the step-by-step instructions on how to set up that hard drive. Okay, not only physical setup, but the actual software interface as well, in case it's a RAID or just Windows hard drive setup. So it's all here step-by-step. Okay. All right. Last but not least, for today's purposes, I'm going to show you guys the NVR3 software, but if you were to have gotten one of our standalone Windows NVR systems, other than needing to know how to set up the hard drive from the quick installation guide, there's also a few networking things I want to cover. So every standalone NVR from ACTI comes with at least 2 network ports, and the point of having those 2 network ports, okay, is to be able to physically separate out your camera traffic from your router traffic. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which LAN you choose here to be your camera network or your router network. Okay, but one needs to go to the cameras, other one needs to go to the router, and they need to be in completely different subnets. So if your camera network is 192.168.0, for example, then your router network needs to be something like 192.168.1. And this can all be configured from the control panel. Okay, so if you come into Start menu, Control Panel, you want to come into Network and Internet, you want to come into Network and Sharing Center, change adapter settings, and you'll see on the Windows systems, you'll see your physical connections. So for example, if this was my LAN 1, I'm going to click on it, right-click, go to Properties, double-click on IPv4 here, and then this is where you can configure the address of LAN 1, and then you can do it for the same thing for LAN 2. Just remember, whichever LAN is your camera LAN, all you need to fill out is the IP address and the subnet. You don't need anything else in there for the camera LAN. Okay. All right. Are there any questions on what I covered thus far? This is actually from my computer, so it'll say LAN 1, LAN 2, so on and so forth for whatever system that you're on. Okay, so for example, my computer has a LAN 1, LAN 3, a couple other LANs as well. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Were there any other questions before I move on? You don't need a gateway on the camera LAN. Only to the router LAN. Okay, then we'll go ahead and get started. So for the NVR3 software, okay, again, you can always grab it from the download center here. just tell it you're looking for a software and firmware download for video management system, and you'll go ahead and get all of the results. So we do have two different editions. We have Enterprise, we have Corporate. Most of our standalones are shipped out with Corporate now, or actually all of them are shipped out now with Corporate, okay? So make sure you are downloading the right edition if you guys are looking for an update, okay? All right, and so when you do download it and install it, you will get an icon that looks like this. You can access it through the workstation software here, or you can access it through the Internet Explorer. So for today's purposes, I'm going to go ahead and show you the tutorial through the Internet Explorer, but just know that you can use the software and they're actually the same interface. Okay. All right.
In enterprise.
Between corporate and enterprise. The licensing prices are different just because the functionalities are different. On corporate, there's a lot more functionalities that you can have. You can sync it up with our analytics, our POS. You can get notifications from the ALPR. There's digital input and output, for example. So if customers just want the basic live view and playback, then they can just use the enterprise. If they want to go ahead and start thinking about those other additional functions, they want to go ahead and move to corporate. I'm going to show you guys corporate today. Most of the functions I go over are available in the enterprise. If it's not available in the enterprise, I will let you know.
All right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and log on in. Okay, so this is what we call our live view. If you look towards on the right-hand side here, there are three tabs. First one is the live view where you see everything in real time. Second one is the playback. You see everything, all of its recording. And third one, setup. Okay. So on this live view page, it's very easy to navigate. All you have to do is click and drag your cameras out onto the screen. Okay, if you double-click on any of the cameras, it'll automatically blow it up to the main view. If you double-click again, it'll go back to the regular view that you have. Okay. If you look here at the top, these are all of our layouts. Okay. We do offer a lot of different layout, views. Okay, layout views. But if you want to customize one of your own, that's totally fine as well. All you have to do is create a new view and edit it accordingly. So if you look up here, these are all of our view shortcuts. If you ever forget what they mean, just hover over it. It'll tell you. So let's go ahead and create a new view. Okay. This will be for Tel-Star. You can put it under an existing folder, or you can create a brand new group. So I'm going to go ahead and put it under one of the groups here. But if you were to add it as a new group, you have the choice of making this view public or private. So if the view is private, it means only the users in your particular user group are going to be able to see this view. So sometimes you want the managers to see one thing, you want the guard shack to see another, and you don't want them mixing together. You can just make it a private view. Okay. So as you can see, for our purposes, there is a lock on ours. It is private. You can set it as the default view, which means this is the first thing that people are going to see when they log into the MVR. Okay. So now you'll see that under our views here, it is under the tutorial folder, and this is our new view. So let's say we want to go ahead and customize it. We just have to click on the edit view here, and you'll see in the bottom right corner of every box now, there is a small square. If you just click and drag, you'll be able to customize the view this way. So let's say you have a couple corridor cameras and you want to go ahead and display them lengthwise, that's how you can do it. Okay. And once you're done, you just click on the Save View button here, and it'll go ahead and save that view for you. And you can start clicking and dragging your cameras out there. Okay. All right. So other things that you can do on the live view, you can go ahead and digitally zoom in, meaning you're just blowing up the pixels. All you have to do is click and drag on the screen itself, and go ahead and draw a box, and it will go ahead and zoom in for you. Okay. So, and once you're done, you can go ahead and right-click on the red box in the bottom right corner, and it'll go ahead and jump back out. All that did have PTZ functions, you can go ahead and use the optical zoom by using the PTZ panel here on the left. Just make sure that sometimes it is minimized, so you may have to scroll down or just minimize the other tabs. Okay. So for example, if I click on a view that does not have PTZ functions, you'll see that the PTZ panel is grayed out. But if I click on one of the cameras that does have the functionality, then you'll see everything comes up. So you can zoom in, you can zoom out, up and down, left and right, refocus, etc. That's all available from the PTZ panel here. Okay. All right. So as you can see on the screen, we have what is called our EMAP. Okay. So on this EMAP, you can put shortcuts to other views. You can put shortcuts to cameras. So it's very easy to set up. All you have to do is in your view, just go ahead and click on the Edit View, and you'll see here it says to create a map. You can go ahead and upload images that you had before, or you can browse for a new one and add it in. Okay. And once you do, let's go ahead and make this bigger. Once you do, you can go ahead and start clicking and dragging cameras out onto the screen, for example. Okay. There will be this little shadow here that you can reorient depending on which direction the camera is looking in. Just know it's not to scale, it's just for your reference. Okay. You can also click and drag views out onto the screen as well. Okay, like that. So once you're done, you go ahead and save view. And what you can do is, let's say you were looking at this particular view, but somebody said at this location something's going on that you need to take a quick look at. So you can go ahead and double click on any of the cameras and it'll go ahead and give you a shortcut of a view, like so. All right. And if you decide that this is something you need to take a look at real quick, you can just click and drag it over to the screen, double click, and it'll go ahead and let you see what's going on at the camera. Okay. And so you can also, let's say you need to jump immediately over to that location, especially when you have a lot of sites, a lot of different locations, it gets harder to kind of scroll through the views here. Okay. So you can just use the view shortcut, it'll jump right over to that location, and you can see exactly what's going on there. And as you can see, I have an EMAP on this view as well. Once I'm done, I can go ahead and click on the control center view again. I'll go right back to my main view. So it's a very easy way to kind of jump back and forth between your various sites, between your various cameras, etc. Okay. And so on the corporate edition, not only can you add in these JPEG maps, but on the corporate edition, you can actually sync it up to Google Maps. So based on the GPS locations you put into the camera, it'll automatically indicate your camera icons for you. You will have a Google map image, so you can do satellite, terrain, etc., as to where your cameras are. Okay? All right. Were there any questions on what I covered thus far?
That map printable, or does that do that?
I guess you could print screen it and then print it out for your reference. When you upload it, it is well, I guess you want it with the cameras, right? So I guess you could use our floor planner instead, because that'd be more printable. That's already going to click and drag the cameras out. But if you want to just use the Google Maps function and just have the cameras already there, I'd say just print the screen and get it that way.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. So as you can see on the screen, whenever I hover my mouse over a particular camera, I'll get this little bar here at the bottom. So this is what we call our instant playback. So basically, if you were to go into the playback right now, you'd be able to see the playback of all your cameras, but oftentimes people don't want to lose the live view of all their other cameras just for the sake of one, right? But that's why you can have the instant playback. So with the instant playback, if you just click on the play button, you automatically get a playback interface. Okay, and you can go ahead and click and drag through the playback here to look for a particular incident. You can use the calendar to go back to a particular date and time, all the while still seeing the live view of your other cameras. In fact, if you wanted to still be able to see the live view of that particular camera, you can just click and drag it over, still watch it in live view, and be scrolling through the playback to check on a particular incident. Okay. All right. So, for example, you'll see that you get the motion icons here as well. if this was something that you needed to go ahead and bookmark for later, you can go ahead and click on the bookmark icon. You can name it, let's say, for example, unknown entry. You can say this is the front entrance east wing, for example, and hit apply. And I'll show you later how to look up that bookmark later. Okay? So you can fast forward it, slow it down, jump to the current time, take snapshots. After everything's said and done, you can just click on the live view mode and it'll go right back to the original live view. Okay? Another function on the live view that we have is called visual tracking. So this is particularly helpful when you have cameras that are side by side to one another. Okay? So for example, let's see, I think it is this one. Yeah. So for example, let's say that we have our sidewalk here, and we want to go ahead and see where a person is going to. So they might be walking to the left, and we want to see who it is when they come into the back door. So if we have a shortcut here for that visual tracking, we can click on that square. It'll automatically jump over to that entrance, or let's say the next part of the hallway, right around the corner, outside the elevator, etc. And if we had another visual tracking shortcut here, we could jump right back to that original camera. So I think this one goes over here, yeah, to the other entrance. Okay, so that's another shortcut that you can use to jump in between cameras quickly, and that way, just in case you had your views weren't all set up, or they were set up funky, and customers wanted it a certain way, but they did want to see what's going on right around it, they can use that visual tracking function. Okay. I'm sorry? That will be done under the Setup tab. I will go over that later when we get there, and if I do forget, please remind me, okay? Okay. So these are just the live view functions for now. We're not worrying too much about setup. I will get into that though, okay? All right. Other than that, if you right-click on any of the cameras, it gives you a lot of options here. Go into that instant playback mode I talked about, making bookmarks, digital zooming in, snapshots, audio, getting rid of a camera, okay? If you ever need to get rid of any of your views, click on the options here, click on the view manager, and this is where you can get rid of your views or rename them. Okay. All right. Are there any questions about the live view functionality before I go into the playback? We're okay? All right. Oh, one other thing, audio, if you're trying to listen to a camera, make sure that it's highlighted in that orange box around it. Make sure your volume's up here. Okay? Usually is up by default, but sometimes people mute it and they don't realize it. Okay, so let's jump into the playback here. Whatever cameras you had on the live view, you're going to see that here in the playback. Again, if you just click and drag on through, you'll see all of your footage. You'll see these, this is where our bookmark was, okay? And you'll see that anytime there was motion, there will actually be a green bar here. Let me jump to a time where it might be easier to see all those green bars. Maybe yesterday around 15? Yeah, there we go. So all these green bars, they basically indicate whenever there was motion going on. So that's one way that it'll be easy for you to see your particular footage. Okay? So if you ever get lost, you click on the arrow here to go to the current time. If you want to ever look for a particular date and time, you can do that here. If you want to change the time range that you're looking at something, you can look at it down to 10 minutes, up to 1 day. Again, fast forward, slow it down. So this F frame rate is talking about looking at the speed frame by frame. So this is particularly helpful when you want to look for the best angle for maybe a license plate, maybe someone's face. And so because all it does is it jumps through the footage frame by frame. So if I have it on F speed and click on the play button, take a look at the numbers here. You'll see that it's jumping every third frame. Okay. So this way, it can really help you go really slowly to try to find that best angle in order for your snapshot, for your export, etc. Okay. All right. And so in your playback here, you can go ahead and export There's a couple ways to do so. One, you can right-click and tell it to export video. We have functions up here as well to tell it to export video. And so if you already know the particular time range that you want to export, this is probably the easiest way to do so. Just go ahead and insert in the time and date range that you want to export into here. But a lot of times you don't know, right? You're not sure. So let's say you're scrolling through your video and you realize that on this particular camera, this is when your incident began. So you want to go ahead and right-click on the playback, tell it to mark export start, and then let's go ahead and let it play. You'll see that as it plays, it's actually highlighting in orange. Let's say you realize this is when your incident stopped. You can go ahead and right-click, tell it to mark export end, right-click one more time, and tell it to export the video. And then you'll see now the section that we highlighted is automatically inserted into this time duration here, and that way you don't have to be scrambling for a piece of paper and pen somewhere and writing it down and all the minutes and seconds and hours. Okay? I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? How to get to this page? Okay, there's a couple ways. So you can click on the export video button here. You right-click on the video and click export video here. But if you're just browsing through your video because you're not sure when and where it started, okay, you can right-click on the playback bar, tell it to mark export start. You can click and drag it. You can let it play out. Okay, right-click one more time, tell it to mark export end. Right-click again and tell it to export this video. And then that date and time range will already be in here. Okay. All right. Okay. There are a couple video formats that we allow you to export out. Okay, there's AVI, there's RAW, there's Player. So AVI is really easy to play back. Any Windows PC with that Windows Media Player is going to be able to play back your AVI. Okay. And so you can have various overlays, okay, camera ID, the name, date, time. If you want to change the style, meaning the font, the color, the location, all of that, it's all done under the style button here. Skip video gaps, especially if you were recording based on motion, you don't want to sit through those black gaps. So you can go ahead and check mark skip video gaps. It'll compress all the video together for you while still keeping all of the timestamps. If you want to add a watermark, it's here, adding text. And last but not least, you can go ahead and browse for whatever file path that the computer has access to. Okay, so that's a very quick and easy way to set up a video format. The thing is with the AVI is just because it is trying to not only export your video, it is also converting the video. It does take a little bit of time to export that out. So for example, if I was trying to export out a 1-minute clip, usually I would say the AVI is probably going to take that full minute to export out that video. So if you need to just be in and out of a particular site, I recommend just exporting out as a RAW file. So sometimes it's 10 times faster. So if it's a 1-minute clip, that RAW file might be out within 10 seconds. Okay. So on the RAW file, you can again skip the video gaps if you want. But this is basically just the .raw format footage. There's no overlay, nothing. And depending on the authorities, I think most police departments want the raw footage. They don't want anything edited. They don't want anything on there. Okay. So if you do export it out as a raw file, you need to come into our download center and search for what is called the archive player. So this is what you're going to need in order to play that raw footage afterwards. Okay. Very straightforward to use. If you need the user manual, it's there. This is the download that you need. And afterwards, if you decide that you do need to convert that over into an AVI, you can use our free media converter as well. Again, very straightforward to use. If you need the user manual, it's there. But this is the download that you need. And you can convert it from raw file to AVI, to JPEG, etc. Okay, so again, if you need to just get in and out, export it as a raw, and convert it later with a media converter. Okay. So last but not least, we do allow you to export the footage out as a player. So this is kind of a compromise between AVI and RAW. AVI takes longer, RAW is much faster, but you need to grab something separate. Player it'll export everything out about at the speed of a RAW file, and it comes embedded with its own player. The only limitation to this is that you can only export 4 cameras at once. Okay, and once you do export it out, you're going to get an icon that looks like this. So when you open it up, it's actually a mini playback interface. All right. So you can go ahead, time range, fast forwarding, clicking and dragging. You get your motion icons as well. If you don't like it, you can click on the running man, turn that off. And what's nice about it is you can really follow an event through multiple cameras. So if I go ahead and let it play here, let's say there was an event going on here. I can double click, watch it happen. Double click again, let's say it moved over here, I can keep watching the footage, and the whole time it's just playing through this footage. So I can basically just watch the whole event through multiple cameras until the event has ended. Okay. All right, so that's the player. Any questions on exporting video? Okay. So after that's done, if you don't want it anymore, just right-click, click on Clear Selection. All right? All right. So again, you can take snapshots. If you do take a snapshot, it'll go, you'll see the file locations here in the bottom left corner. You can always change that location in the setup later, which I'll show you. And so that's about it for the main functions of the playback. Again, click and drag, right, and look for your motion icons. But a lot of times, you want to be able to go ahead and let the NVR do a smart search or a more advanced search for you, okay? So let's go back to, say, yesterday, around 3. Okay, so let's say we're looking for particular motion at a certain time. Say event, we can go ahead and use the advanced searches here on the left. So if we're looking for a particular event, okay, we're looking for it on this device, and we are looking for, let's say, just motion, okay? So we don't need any of this other stuff. So these are all analytics that are available on the corporate, okay? So if you have enterprise, you will be able to look for motion, you will be able to look for tampering. All this other stuff is available on the corporate, okay? So all these analytics, line crossing, forbidden area, loitering, unattended objects, all of this is corporate, okay? So if we go ahead and look for motion, then go ahead and click on search, and it will basically give us all of the results in thumbnail form, okay? So this is a much easier way to try to differentiate between what if it was a false trigger, let's say the door just didn't close fast enough and therefore it triggered again. This is a very simple way to figure out when a particular event happens. So you can actually scroll through your thumbnails instead of scrolling through your playback. And once you figure out this was the particular incident you were looking for, just double click on the thumbnail, it'll automatically jump to that spot on the playback. Okay? And then again, you can do your export video from there. Alright? Okay. So another thing that you can do is called the smart search. So this is actually analyzing the footage, so I'm not going to execute it for you all the way, but it basically, the result format will be the same as the event search. It'll give you a lot of the thumbnails. You can scroll through it, double click, and go to the event that you were looking for. So smart search you want to use when you're looking for a particular event in a very specific region. So let's say we want to know when this car disappeared. So oftentimes our motion box might be over this whole door, or it might be over this entire front part of the parking lot. We're probably not going to draw a motion box over that one spot only, right? But and so if we scroll through the playback, we'll probably we'll see where there was motion indicated when that car left, but we'll see it when the door opened, we'll see it when all the other cars left as well. We just want to know for that particular spot. So that's when you can come over here and go to the smart search. So let's say we know general ballpark, it probably disappeared between, 3 and 4:30, and we wanted to check every 30 seconds, okay? Check every 30 seconds to see if anything has changed in that particular spot. So we want to say we're looking for it for motion detection. We click on this, and we'll see these icons light up. So you can either draw a rectangle or or draw your own shape. So just going to do it like this real quick. So I just want to know when motion happened in this particular region or when this object here disappeared. All right, and afterwards I hit search. It'll give me those thumbnail results and go ahead and give us the results, and you can export out accordingly. Okay, so that's a nice way to just let the NVR do the work for you. Okay, last but not least, we have the bookmark search. So I believe we made a bookmark on this camera, right? And so you can look up based on device. You can look up based on keyword. So our keyword, I think we had unknown entry, something about the front entrance, but let's just say all I remember is I called it unknown. Okay, and click search, and again it'll give it to me in thumbnail form. This is the only one we have. Right, double click on it, it'll jump straight to that particular time. Okay, and that way if you click here, it'll give you all of the details that we wrote down earlier. Okay, so again, export your video, take a snapshot, etc. Okay. All right. I think that's about all I had for the playback. The other searches that are in this list here, all of these are for corporate only, because again, only corporate will have will allow your NVR to connect to your access control, your DIDO, your POS, car parks, notifications, etc. Okay, but the three that I showed you, those are available on enterprise as well. Okay. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't quite hear it. All of the current NVRs come with corporate, yes. If you purchase a standalone from us, it will be corporate. Okay. If there are no questions, I will move on to the setup. Okay. Do we need to take a break? Are you guys okay? We're good. Okay. So let's come into devices. I think you guys have worked with our products before, so I'm not going to go too in detail, but I think you guys already know if you want to add in a camera, click on devices, click on add. Hybrid search will look for all your cameras. You can add it in manually as well, and just type in the IP address, port, etc. Okay. And so once you add in your camera, you'll see your camera list on the left. These are just a summary of everything here on the main page. And so if we click on one of the cameras in question, go ahead and work on this one. Okay, so you'll see all of your tabs here, all of your information here. Make sure when you add a camera manually that you click on Get Device Settings first, and then you hit Apply. And that way the NVR will properly sync up with the camera. You can tell if it was not properly synced up, if that somebody forgot to click Get Device Settings. If on this page you scroll all the way down and you don't see the serial number and the firmware. So you should always see the serial number and firmware of your camera. If you don't, make sure you click on Get Device Settings. All right? Okay, so let's talk about the video settings real quick. If you don't care about bandwidth too much, you can go ahead and leave it unlimited. Otherwise, the first setting I would recommend is, in order to maximize your storage space and make sure you don't take up too much bandwidth, is to actually put your camera on variable bitrate as long as you have this maximum bitrate function. Not all of the cameras, not all of the firmwares have this function, but if they do, leave the camera on variable bitrate mode and cap off that variable bitrate. And that way it's allowed to fluctuate, depending on how much it actually needs. But if it doesn't need above a certain amount, you make sure that it's not killing your bandwidth either. Okay, so leave it at 2M. Yes, was there a question?
Yeah, I do know the maximum.
Okay, so you want the maximum bitrate to be comparable to the resolution. So for example, here I have 2048 by 1536. If I pull out my calculator, you'll see that this is about 3 million, okay, meaning it's about 3 megapixels, 3 million pixels, okay? So that means that my bit rate should be no more between 3 or 4, okay? So if you want to do 3.5, you can. If you're really concerned about bandwidth but you want to try this out, do 3. using 2 megapixels, my bitrate should be about 2 to 3. So that's the general rule that you can use. Okay. So that's if it allows you to cap off the variable bitrate. If it does not, I highly recommend you leave it on constant and cap off the maximum bitrate again. Okay, don't leave it on unlimited unless you really don't care about bandwidth. Okay. All right. Let's see. What else on this page? Right. Video adjustment, I'd say if you're, because we made changes. If you just want to do the most basic settings for the camera, you just want to slap it up there and just give them something basic to work with. You want to come into video adjustment here, and you want to check on the shutter speed. All right, so I usually recommend that it stays at 1/15. If you're finding that you have additional motion blur, you can bump it up incrementally. Okay, there's a lot of options here. Bump it up incrementally just because every time you do, you're going to get more noise in your picture and your picture's going to get a little darker. Okay, so I'd say start at 1/15. WDR helps balance out the contrast. If there are parts of the picture that are really dark and really bright, you want to turn on this wide dynamic range, WDR. Okay. Other than that, everything else is up to you. Oh, if you install the camera upside down, don't freak out. You can always flip the video here at the top. Okay. All right. And now for motion detection. You can click on motion setup and arrange your boxes accordingly. So don't use one big box for the entire picture. It does not make it accurate at all. You want to use as many boxes as possible, and you want to make sure that they're as small as you can go, okay, without not catching what you need. Just because the smaller the boxes, the more accurate it's going to be. So by default, the sensitivity is 70. That's usually enough for, I'd say, the vast majority of installations. What you want to take a look at is actually the threshold percentage. So the sensitivity is how sensitive each individual pixel is to change. So again, 70 is okay, but the threshold percentage is the percent of pixels that have to be triggered in order for it to be considered motion. So the higher the sensitivity, the more likely it's going to go off, right, because it's very sensitive. But the lower the threshold percentage, okay, the lower the amount of pixels that have to be triggered to go off, the lower the threshold is going to be more, it's going to trigger more often. Does that make sense? So right now, if a car were to come through here, it's definitely going to take up at least 10% of the pixels in this picture. Or in this box, I should say, okay? But if we had a dog come through here, I don't know, a dog actually might pick up 10%. But we're not going to get, anything that doesn't trigger at least 10% is not going to go off. So let's say on this sidewalk, this box is really small, so anything that goes by, if a rabbit comes by, it's going to trigger. Let's say I just want to know, let's say people, okay, people, feet are probably going to trigger more than a bird, okay? So that way 10% is probably going to be okay. Maybe I'd bump it up to like 20, 25. But sometimes it does take a little bit of trial and error, but just make sure that you adjust your threshold percentage accordingly, all right? So make sure you don't cover areas you don't need, like trees, sky. As you can see, we might be looking for people on the sidewalk, but we don't need to cover this whole sidewalk, right? Just because most likely if they're going to be walking on this, they are going to trigger that center section, okay? So again, that makes it much more accurate. Okay? Sun's coming up for us. Okay. Any questions on motion setup? You can click and drag, you can resize.
So the question is basically percentage of the box has to be covered in order to be operating.
You're saying the box has to cover the area in order to pick up the object in that area. Was that the question? percentage for each individual box.
Okay. All right. What about the timer?
Okay, so the timer is the amount of seconds you want to wait in between each motion trigger before you allow the next one in. So I would say 5 is probably okay. It doesn't need to be 1. Just because if somebody were to keep tap dancing in box number 3 here, okay, 1 second mean you're going to get it's going to basically send an event notification to the MVR every second. Like there's motion, there's motion, there's motion, there's motion. But if they were to tap dance for 10 seconds and you had the timer at 5, it's only going to send 2 of those notifications. Okay, so it lowers the amount of stress that's on the MVR. It makes sure that your event panel on the left isn't going to go crazy. Okay, and it's just generally a better use of the software. All right. Any questions on this page here? We're okay. All right. So as you can see, depending on your camera model, there will usually be 2 or more streams, okay, or medias. All right. So there's stream 1, stream 2. You'll see here in the bottom, you can always toggle in between the 2. Stream 1, we always allow it to be a higher resolution than stream 2. Okay. So some customers, they have bandwidth issues. Their cell phones, for example, don't do too well over stream 1, okay, just because they're in a remote location, so they need stream 2. Or sometimes it's because their particular network can't handle that much traffic. So what you can do is you can use dual stream functions. So on the basic tab here, you'll see here, default live view stream, you can set it to be 2, recording stream, you can set it to be 1. This means that if an incident were to happen, what's recorded is actually the highest quality stream. Okay, but what they're seeing on the live view screen is actually stream 2, which might be a little lower quality, but it's making sure that there's not too much traffic going on in the network. But quite honestly, if you have 4 or more cameras up on the screen, you can't tell that you're looking at stream 2 anyway. So it's a much better use of the amount of bandwidth you're being given for the system. Okay, so I would, unless they really don't care, I would recommend you go ahead and try that out. By default, okay, it's always going to be live view stream 1, recording stream 1. Okay, so only if you change it here will that be otherwise. Okay, so if they have a lot of cameras on the screen, you could probably even do VGA 640 by 480 and they couldn't tell. All right, for this one we've put it at 1280 by 720. And so on the live view screen, it's been at 1.3. So that's when I blow it up. It's not great, especially because this is just one of our window cameras. And so, but yeah, so if I switch over to stream 2 right now, you can't quite tell the difference, stream 1, stream 2. Okay, so it's better to just do stream 2 on the live view. Okay, let's see. Any other questions on the device page before I go on to the other tabs? Frame rate? So that's really up to you guys, okay? The size of the packet is ultimately determined by the bit rate, but the frame rate, of course, is it's gonna affect quality-wise, right? So it's up to you, whatever the customer wants to have. I can't hear you. Can you get a little closer to the microphone?
For those they want real-time video, I think what's your frame rate needs to be to not have certain video, real-time.
Well, it depends on how fast they're moving, right? So it really depends on every environment. You can start at 8 frames per second. You can start at 15 frames per second and see what you think. And otherwise, you can drop it down. Probably not 1 or 3, or maybe even 5. 5, I don't. If someone's walking through, I think it is gonna clip unless they're moving really slow. So you can try it at those at let's say 8:15 to see that's okay for them.
Like a casino environment, they're just very 30 frames per second.
Mhm. Sure.
You guys consider real time video.
I mean, all of our cameras, they go up to 30 frames per second. So some of them even go up to 60, depending on the application. So we do offer a range depending on what you guys need.
My question is, what you guys recommend as
I'm not sure if we necessarily recommend a particular setting, just because, again, it does vary depending on the application. So, again, you can start at 15, put it at 30 if you wanted to, right? I think to the naked eye, I don't think there's a big difference between 15 and 30. So you may as well just set it at 15 unless you find otherwise.
some of the things I read,
Mm-hmm.
when I can 20 frames per second,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Uh-huh.
but if you play it back frame by frame,
Uh-huh.
you're more lost footage.
Of course, right? It's going to be double than the 15. So, again, to the naked eye, just watching the footage, you probably cannot tell the difference. But if you need all of those frames, then of course, set it to the higher frame rate.
I just want to know what you guys, what official takeoff, what how this will work.
Again, I'm not sure if there is one, but those would be the recommendations that I would give. No problem. Okay. Just in case you guys need it, if you ever need to copy the settings in between cameras, you can click on the copy button. You can copy over the basic settings, the video settings. If you only check mark the video settings, it'll only allow you to copy over to cameras of the same model. And that way it can save you a lot of time once you do set up your bitrate and resolution, all that. Just copy it over to everything else of the same model. Okay. Were gonna ask that, or you were gonna ask about something else? Okay. Yes, that copy button saves a lot of time. Okay. It will not be copying motion settings, okay, just because every motion setting should be set up individually because every environment is different. But it will copy over all of these settings. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about users. So we have user groups and we have users. So in case you don't see the users here, it's because they got minimized. Okay, so don't panic. So you can have as many user groups as you want. You can have as many users within the user groups as you want as well. Okay, so the good thing is you can have user groups, let's say for the managers, for the guard shack, for the administrative people, and you can all give them individual usernames so that if they did have to leave, for example, you can just delete their particular login out of the system without changing everybody's login, okay? And so if you want to add in a user, very simple, just click add their account, their password, put in their name so you remember who it is and what group they belong to, okay? But as for actual permissions, that's all done per user group. So remember I talked about the private and public views on the live view page. So if, for example, our view was private for the tutorial group, only people who are labeled as a tutorial user under this user group are going to be allowed to see that view. Nobody else. Okay. So if we click on our particular user group, these are the most basic permission settings. Live playback setup. Usually for most users, you don't want them to have setup. Okay. In terms of the permissions, you can actually do it for individual cameras. So you can see under this particular login, there's actually quite a few cameras that are being hidden. Okay. So their users in this particular user group will not be able to see that those cameras even exist. All right. So for the cameras that they are allowed to see, you can still restrict various settings. Maybe for some of them you want them to have playback, some of them you don't. Okay, maybe for some you want them to touch the PCC, most likely not for most end users. Well, I guess it depends, right? So whether or not you want them to use the PCC, whether or not you want them to be able to export anything, if they are allowed to see the playback. Okay, so that's all done under the user tab. Any questions on this page? Last page, under devices?
Yes, under devices. Now,
Sure.
if you have 3 NVRs in locations with 300 cameras, and how do you tell cameras are on a device?
If you have 3 different NVRs with 300 cameras, how do you tell which camera goes to which device? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be our CMS. So the CMS is which I'll show you briefly after this, is our central management system, and it will it allows you to control multiple cameras across all NVRs. This is just the NVR software, so this would just be for one server. So all of these cameras belong to this server right now.
Here's one of the answers is that up there, like the other day at the Ballsville, when it's PCR, we had to replace one of the PCRs. Before we got back from the PCR, well, the information wasn't very management system, it was being what cameras belong to it, so we had to go through and find out what cameras was on NVR 1 and 3, and then the ones that was on those, we had to figure out between those 3 and put those on like 2.
So I would say if you make a backup file, okay, you can avoid all of that, because that backup file will automatically restore all of the cameras that were originally on the system.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before I move on to a different tab? Okay. So let's go into storage. For the storage page, okay, basically after you set up your hard drives according to the quick installation guide, don't forget to come into here and check mark the drive that you just initialized, okay? Make sure you never record to the C drive. That's where the OS is located. Never a good idea. So go ahead and check mark your appropriate drives. For this reserve space, don't ever go below the default 20 gigs. If anything, bump it up. So in order to calculate what it should be, I recommend doing that based on the number of cameras. So for example, we have 9 cameras in the system. Every camera needs at least 2 gigs of space on the hard drive for the hard drive to be able to read and write properly. So 9 times 2 is 18. I would say to be safe, I would leave the reserve space at 20, maybe 25 if there's a lot of cameras, okay? And so that's how you can tell what your reserve space should be, if not already 20 gigs. Okay? All right. This keep system logs, this is not talking about the recordings. This is talking about the system log up here. Basically, who logged in, when, did what, etc. Okay? Doesn't take up that much space on the system, so it's really up to you. All right. Schedule tab. So, yes, was there a question?
Storage.
Okay, so you will get that indicator as long as it is trying to overwrite files, okay? As long as the free space is not significantly below the reserved space, there's no issues. So for example, if right here, the reserved space is 40, my free space is 40, it might dip below to maybe 39, 38, and you'll get that icon, but it's okay, because it's actually just going to overwrite. So if you click elsewhere, come back, you'll see that those numbers are actually fluctuating a little bit. As long as it's not significantly below, it's fine. But if you saw that reserve space was 40, for example, and the free space was down to like 30, schedule tab, this is how you are telling all the cameras to record. All right, so this is a summary. So let's go into one of the cameras. You'll see here, red is schedule, blue is event. Event means digital input, output, motion, any of that. Okay. So between the hours of, what is this, 4:30 to 5:45 or so, it is recording full time because it is scheduled to record at that time. Otherwise, it's recording based on event. Basically, it's recording only based on motion. Okay. These diagonal lines means it's allowed to handle events, basically anything you set up here. If you don't have those lines, it is not allowed to do events during those times. So for example, if I wanted it to PTZ a particular camera over to another section of the parking lot, if there was a particular incident, I don't want it to do that in the earlier hours of the evening, but only during the other hours of the day. Okay. All right, and again, once your settings are done, you can copy it over to the other cameras. If a camera is recording based on motion, all right, you will see this pre- and post-buffer, basically how many seconds before the motion you want recorded and how many seconds after the motion you want recorded as well. Okay. As for this keep recording files, don't use it unless you want it to record, don't use it unless you want it to erase faster. So for example, some places by law have to get rid of all their recordings after a month, but they might actually have enough storage for 60 days. So that's when they would use this and tell it to erase everything after 30 days, even though they still have space. If you use this by accident, for example, if you only have space for 30 days, but you tell it to keep it for 60 days, it's going to ignore you, and it's going to erase anyways, okay? So only use this if you want it to erase even faster. Okay? All right. You know what? I did not show you guys how to set up visual tracking. Let me do that real quick. So under devices, I-28, I think, has this function. No, it does not. This one? There we go. Okay. So if your camera has the visual tracking function, you'll see it as an option here under the basic tab. It's very simple to set up. Just add what region you want it to be over. Let's say this door, and whatever camera is on the other side. Okay. And that's it. And you hit apply. Make sense? Okay. So for the event tab, all right, we have events for the server, we have events for the camera. For the server, I'd say set up the event if a disk is not found. Basically, a hard drive has gone bad, all right? So if you double click on the response section, there's different things that you can have it do. Send you an email, have the system beep, have maybe like a PDF pop up on the live view, okay? And all the other stuff, all right? Schedule service stopping, that means there's something not right with the NVR, or maybe someone is turning off the services. That's probably something you want to be alerted by as well. For the cameras, we do allow various events for, let's say, motion. If this is an analytics camera, you can have various responses as well for the analytical cameras. Double click, again, uploading snapshots, emails, having things pop up on the live view, having a camera go to a particular spot, etc. All right? Okay. Last but not least, system. So if you do set up email functions, make sure you set up the email server here, same with the FTP server, etc. Export settings, this is where your snapshots will go to automatically. Okay, licenses, this is where you can register them, put in your license key. Your member email and password is whatever you use to log into the ACTI website here. If you don't have a login, register real quick, takes 5 minutes, okay? And then you can use your email and your password to register your license key. If your NVR is not on the network, okay, you have to do offline registration here, which means you need to get to a computer with internet first, come into support, come into license registration, okay? And you need to have your license key and your MAC address of the NVR. It will email you a file, and then you want MVR, import it in, and hit apply. Okay. Last but not least, after everything is said and done, you have fully configured your MVR, you are ready to go. Make sure you make a backup file. It takes 5 seconds, not even 5 seconds. Just make a backup file, save to the desktop, hit backup, backup successful. It just saves all of my camera names, IP addresses, motion, configure everything you just did, okay, in 2 seconds. So God forbid, if anything were to happen to your server, you can use this backup file, restore it here, it'll automatically put everything back in 2 seconds, okay? So it saves you a lot of time if anything were to go wrong.
See, that's what happened at Barber. The backup file was on the server. The server would not
Crash. Yeah, so you want to save those backup files elsewhere, not on the server, because it's just in case the server dies, right? So make sure you save it elsewhere in your guys' office. So just, yeah, you can always change the name. You know, you can just name it based on every site, or you can name it even based on serial numbers, MAC address, anything like that. So that way you guys can always pull that up in case you need it. Okay. All right. If you guys do want to play with the MVR by yourselves, it is available for you guys to play with. If you go to mvr3.acti.com, log in with your ACTI email address and password, okay? And you'll basically be able to go ahead and play around with the MVR by yourself, clicking and dragging cameras. If you want to demo the MVR3 to any of your customers, okay, you can go ahead and use this site. We have this site all set up for you with the latest cameras, with all of the analytic functions, if that's something that they're interested in. So you'll see the cameras here, you'll see the analytic sites. Here, for example, if you want to show them point of sales, you can go ahead and let them see what happens when they have a receipt, what happens when you void a transaction. You know, you'll have those overlays, etc. We have plenty of stuff here. Google Maps, if you want to let them see what that could look like, okay? So all of that is here at your disposal at that particular website, okay? And I know that you guys were asking about the CMS as well. Oh, drat. I think the CMS is down. Oh, drat. Okay, I'll have to show that to you guys some other time. But, yeah, essentially if you have multiple MVRs and you want to put them all together, the interface is exactly the same, except here under cameras, instead of only seeing cameras, you'll see a list of all of your MVRs. You can configure all of them right from the CMS. You never have to log into any of your MVRs again. Okay? All right. Uh-huh.
Hey, how long would it take you to go over setting up mobile clients?
Mobile client? Sure. It's a little hard to show. Let me see. Okay. So mobile client, it is available for iOS and for Android. Okay. You want to go to your Apple Store or your Play Store, download what is called the ACTI mobile client. Okay. Let's find those manuals. So mobile client, VMS manual. So for example, if we had Android, we can open up the user manual here. Go ahead and open that up. So your app in the store looks like this. Okay, looks like a black camera. So you open it up. You go ahead and click on the plus button. All right. If you're adding in a server, you want to go ahead and put in server. You just name it whatever you'd like. I know it's a little hard to see. All right. You guys see that? So name it whatever you'd like, the IP address, the port, the account, and then just click on the green check mark at the top. So as long as you're on the same network as your MVR, the host here will be the internal IP address. Otherwise, you need to put the external IP address of the MVR, meaning you need to port forward the MVR first within the router. So to port forward, you need to make sure that you're port forwarding the router IP address, not the camera LAN IP address, the router IP address. So make sure that's static, okay? And then you need to port forward the port of the MVR. So to forward the IP address of my MVR, that is the one that goes back to my router network, right? Port forward this port within my router, and then when I use my mobile client off-site, I put in the external IP address and port 90 in order to access the MVR. Does that make sense? Okay. So the interface is about the same with the iOS, okay? But again, if you guys need it, the manuals are all in the download center.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
No?
Okay. Well, Mike has my contact info. If you guys do have questions later on, feel free to ask, and we can get that squared away for you guys, okay?
All right.
All right, then you guys have a wonderful Wednesday. And Mike, I'll be waiting for hopefully an email from you with the login, okay? We're trying to finish that up for you guys.
All right, thanks.
No problem. All right, you guys have a great day. All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com